absolutely. So with SigNoz, we're doing about 13 million to 40 million spans per hour. And that is, depending on time of day, people come in during the day and are running reports. They're trying to like add ads. They're trying to do all sorts of stuff like that. And so the number of spans go up during the day quite a bit. But during the night, it's like 13 million spans or so. That is covering all the reporting and all the back end stuff. The front end stuff still isn't covered yet. So this is just back end only. We were going in and we're trying to figure out like basically what the application is doing. So a lot of the lead developers who started the company and started getting the product rolling forward have since left the company, and some of their code is a little bit interesting to look at. You're not exactly certain what's going on. So being able to trace it through and see step by step, I was at this, I did this, I was at this, I did this, I had this value, I did this. That kind of stuff is invaluable. Like it is just so important. And before SigNoz, we tried Jaeger, same thing, to try and like trace through the code, and trying to run it with Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch kept wanting to die like all the time. It was just having all sorts of issues. And so, you know, we just, you're trying to scale it. When you're running a tiny little Elasticsearch cluster, it's perfect. It has no issues at all. But trying to scale that thing up, it takes an entire team just to run it. And myself as one person is not capable of doing that. It seems like SigNoz choosing ClickHouse is a very good idea because I have had no issues. Other than I gave it a few resources at the beginning. So tip to anyone else coming along down the line, make sure you give it enough resources by default. But other than that, it's been like rock solid. I've had no issues with it. It showed me exactly like what's going on, how the code is flowing, where it's going, what logic it's using to determine what response it's going to give, and everything else. And going along with that, we actually had this use case where a few months before I implemented SigNoz, we had an endpoint that we call checklists. And it's basically the checklist to make sure that an ad is ready to play on a sign. So the ad has to go through, it has to get approved, it has to have the right tags on it, it has to be approved by the sign owner, it has to go through all the checklists. And so it was a very slow endpoint, and we knew it was kind of slow given the response times from the router, depending on what campaign it was, what organization it was that was trying to play those things. But it was kind of nebulous because it was like, I took 20 seconds to render this. And it was like, well, so what did you do during that 20 seconds? We had no idea. You could log into the database. You could like try and run a couple queries to try and see, okay, what queries are being run, what's going on. But trying to correlate that to a specific endpoint is next to impossible. And so there was an outage that occurred because of that, because this endpoint started getting so large and running so many queries that started taking down the site for everybody, not just for the person accessing that particular endpoint.
Interesting.
And I spent about 2 weeks diagnosing and finding the cause, and then another 2 weeks fixing the cause, even though I'm not a developer.
2 weeks?
Because,
yeah. And this is because you didn't have any distributed tracing in place at that time when you were trying to debug this.
Exactly. So I had to add a log statement and then run a query, and then add a log statement and run a query, or like add a couple log statements and then run it again and try and see where it would go. And I was trying to reproduce it. And
so
because
you're trying to do this by adding logs at different parts, but you're not getting a sense of like a trace going from the complete request, where it's flowing, right?
Exactly. Plus, the staging environment doesn't have the exact same data as the production environment, and it's not nearly as full featured. So when we were trying to run it in staging, it was running and completing in seconds. And when we ran it in production, all of a sudden we were getting these timeouts, and it was taking down the whole site. And so the whole back end. So we had to like go through it bit by bit, trying to figure out, okay, what are the causes of this? Like, can we reproduce this in testing? Can we reproduce this in a staging environment? Can we do anything else like that? And it was a couple of hellacious weeks of just sitting there and digging through and like, tell me what you're doing. Tell me what this setting is. Tell me what this value is. Tell me what this is, and trying to figure out why it was going down. It was awful. And so I did finally fix it. We got that pushed out, and now the backend doesn't have any issues with the checklist stuff. But now another endpoint came up just the other day. Now that we have SigNoz in place, and now that we have SigNoz in place, it took me 1 hour to figure out exactly why, how, and exactly what was going wrong. And nice. It showed me that, okay, someone hit this particular endpoint with this campaign and this amount of data, and it created all of these SQL queries, literally 10,000 SQL queries in a single request. And it was just...
So the issue was the SQL queries which were being created, and that was sort of getting blocked. Got it.
Exactly. If you do a standard, or if you do a select on all of the rows that you're looking for in the database at one go, it creates one SQL query. It's a little bit big, not terrible. It takes like 5 seconds to complete, which is, it's not great, but it's not terrible. But then you have all of your data right there in memory, and you're able to like iterate through it and do whatever you need to do. Before that, it was going out and it wouldn't cache this data. It would go out and it would say, I'd like this, I would like this, and it would be selecting a single row at a time. And because of that, it was taking over 3 minutes to complete this single request.
Got it.
And by consolidating it down, I showed the developers exactly what was going on. I showed them the data that was being passed in. I showed them the customer. I showed them all of the stuff and exactly how the program flowed through it. And they found it and fixed the issue around it. And instead of 3 minutes, over 3 minutes, it took 2 seconds to complete the exact same request.
That's like 90 times improvement.
It's massive. It's insanely like over the top massive. And this was happening quite a few different times for a few different customers. So people would be requesting this data at this endpoint. And every time that there was a request in, that thread was locked up for that entire period of time. It could not respond to any other customers asking for data for that 3 minutes. But that response would never go back to the customer because the routing proxy that we have in front of it had a strict 30-second timeout. So they would make this request, that thread would lock up for 3 minutes.
And then it would time out.
It would time out in 30 seconds. And then, but the thread still wouldn't be available. So the next time the proxy went in to ask another request of it, it wouldn't be able to get it until that complete thing finished. And so because of the number of threads we have in our production environment, it would eventually exhaust all of them. And that would cause a site outage. And it was the exact same thing happening again. It was a different endpoint, but the exact same problem. And Django terminology calls this an N+1 problem, where instead of creating N queries, you create N+1+1+1+1. Basically, you're asking for the initial query that you're asking for, and then you ask for a query for every single sub item inside of it. And you can't, it's really difficult to tell when that's going to happen. And it's really difficult to like catch that before it does happen. And so before SigNoz, we were having to guess at where that query was. Now we actually are able to like go, oh yeah, it's right there.
Nice. Very interesting. Very interesting to hear that. And given especially the massive like time reduction in the query from 3 minutes to like 2 seconds. And so give me some insights on like how would it would have affected your customers. So if this lockup would have been happening, would it prevent your customers from showing their ads in the design billboards, or will it just slow them? Like how would it impact your business?
So the biggest impact would be the end users trying to add ads, trying to make campaigns, trying to like put their ads into the system and get them ready to go. the signs themselves actually go out and they ask for, all right, what are the next 10 ads that I'm going to play? And it tries to download all those ad images beforehand and have them cached, have all the schedule cached. And then if it's not able to reach the server, it just replays the last set of ads again. And basically, so we lose money when that happens.
Interesting.
But the customers get free ad plays. So it's kind of like a lot of customers are okay with that.
But as a business, you lose money, right? Because you are not able to show customers ads there.
Exactly. But this also loses us business because people look at our site and they go, oh, the site is down. I can't do anything. It's giving me errors. And no one wants to use a buggy site. No one wants to sit there and like try and get it to refresh and try and get it to display. It's not going to work. So we lose money both ways. We lose money both to the people we have to pay for playing their ad multiple times, or the sign owners we have to pay for playing that ad multiple times. And then also to the customers who are like, well, you're buggy and I don't like using your site. So
I think the non-tangible loss is that you lose customer trust and they may not refer you, they may not come back to you. And I think that's that might be a bigger loss. So wow, so this was like directly affecting your business. And like the trust your customers had on you. So it was like critical issue.
For multiple hours each time this happened. Actually, the first time it happened, it was for multiple weeks, for multiple hours throughout those weeks. But then it, like this last time, because I was able to identify it with SigNoz in under an hour and able to show the developers it's exactly right here in the code, this is what caused that issue. And they were able to trace through it and go, oh yeah, I'm able to recreate that. It was done within, a couple of hours. They had a patch out. The site was up. We're good.